Testing. Okay, good evening everybody. You can't see me, I'm down here because we've got a little short mic for me. Welcome to Sudbury Arts Centre here in beautiful St Peter's. As many will know, Sudbury Arts Centre, or St Peter's rather, has been a community centre since being declared redundant as a place of worship in 1968, and has been the location of past hustings, and sometimes I think Lord Andrew Phillips has presided over them, churches together in Sudbury, and now it's Sudbury Arts Centre. Because of its history as a place of hustings and a place for the community, we thought, why don't we do the hustings this time? But we didn't expect it to be quite so quick. We were expecting October, so we were quite surprised that it came now. Sudbury Arts Centre is operated by local charity The Bridge Project. We are politically neutral and have no political affiliations. I'm Ali Burke with the rather grand title of Head of Creative at The Bridge, but aka Dog's Body at Sudbury Arts Centre. So we're going to keep it a bit sort of low-key tonight. I'm not a barrister, I am, a person from the community. So we did try to get Fiona Bruce to come and chair it, but as some of you will know, that this Sudbury and this building in particular have a bit of a difficult past with Fiona. Those of you will know she came and she wasn't very complimentary, shall we say, about Sudbury or this building. So we didn't want her to come. And Sudbury is, of course, Charles Dickens' rotten borough, due to some corrupt hustings, backhanders, rallying of mobs. Tonight, however, we would like to keep it really civil. A reminder that all of the candidates are people, some human even, and so please try to refrain from heckling. I suppose that was me heckling, wasn't it? Certainly any heckling that is persistent or becomes threatening in any way will be shut down, and the worst case will be that you're politely asked to leave the building, but I'm sure that that's not going to be the case because you all look lovely. The fire exits, just so that you know, are the door that you came in, the main end of the building, and also the large north doors over there at the back where we would normally have our cafe. We've got plenty of stewards to help. If you do hear the fire alarm, please leave the building calmly. Make your way to Thomas Gainsborough's statue at the front. And please don't smoke or vape in the toilets because it will set the fire alarm off, and it has happened a few times. Finally, you will have seen that there's a paper slip on your chair. We'd like to take a simple exit poll as you leave, if you wouldn't mind. If you just drop a tick next to the candidate you might vote for, or none of the above is also on there. And pens will be at the back on the table on the way out, and it's completely anonymous, and we will release those results after tonight. Nothing scientific about it whatsoever, just a bit of fun. So let's hear from the candidates. You don't want to hear me, you're here to hear them. Each of them are going to have 5 minutes to introduce themselves to you and tell you the answer to this question. How will you make South Suffolk a better place to live and work? And we're going to start at this end with Tom Bartleet in a second, who is here standing with the Liberal Democrats. Move on to Emma Bishton, who is Labour, on to Jessie Carter, Green Party, James Cartlidge, Conservatives, and Beverly England Reform. And as I say, keep it nice, please. So Tom, if you wouldn't mind answering that question, how will you make South Suffolk a better place to live and work? Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. Good evening, everybody, and thank you for coming. And if I'm too quiet or too loud, just shout, throw bricks, whatever you feel like, but just let me know.
No bricks.
No bricks, all right. Shoes, maybe. Right. So look, so my name's Tom Bartleet, and I'm the Liberal Democrat candidate. I've lived in and around South Suffolk all my adult life. My wife, Jo, and I raised our 3 children in Boxford and have been in our current home near Bures for the last 20 years. South Suffolk is a beautiful part of the world with lovely people. Since the election was called, I've knocked, with my team, on nearly 5,000 doors. And I have to say, the overall mood of the country is not a happy one. The overriding factor on this is so often because people feel that nothing works. I've heard this from so many residents. In the winter, we delivered over 20,000 surveys across the constituency, and it's clear that important services are simply not working for local people. It's almost impossible to get a GP appointment. You simply can't get a dentist, let alone an NHS one. Our rivers and waterways are being polluted with raw sewage. The roads are full of potholes. There's a fear of crime that doesn't reflect the fact that this is a very safe, welcoming place to live. I could go on, but then I'd be like all the other politicians that we see on telly, not answering the question. Instead, I'm going to tell you what the Liberal Democrats will do, what I will do, if you vote to elect me as your MP. We must fix our NHS. A key part of that is primary care. We need a guarantee that you'll be able to access a local doctor within 7 days or 24 hours if truly urgent. To deliver this, we need to recruit and train 8,000 new GPs. This will help fix the front end of healthcare. But equally as important is fixing our broken social care system. The Liberal Democrats will reverse Rishi Sunak's tax cuts to the big banks to fund free personal care for the elderly and disabled adults. We need a long-term plan for social care with support from all parties. A cross-party commission to finally fix social care in England. What we do not need is the punch and judy politics that we see too often from this Conservative government and the opposition. I got involved in politics because I want to be part of real and meaningful change. I'll be honest with you, I'm not interested in climbing any ladders. I'm not seeking your vote for ego or to further my career. I've had a career, and I've built and run a successful business. I know what it takes to deliver, and that's what I will do for the residents of South Suffolk. We need change. We need to press the reset button on British politics. How have we gotten into such a state? We have raw, untreated sewage spilling into our rivers and seas. This happened on average 1,500 times a day in England last year. I actually can't believe I'm saying that in 2024. We need a new regulator with teeth to hold private water companies to account. Regulation has to be tightened. If you set the rules right, you get the right outcomes. I want to be part of that and use my skills and experience without side or ego. I will work with all people to fix these things. I will work with our local stakeholders, including our local police, to ensure not only do we have enough numbers, but that officers are visible and used effectively, especially in our rural communities. I want to see victims of crime supported properly. I want to see burglaries responded to personally. I will support and champion the people of South Suffolk and our businesses every step of the way. I will fight to scrap business rates, replacing them with a commercial landowner levy. I believe that you truly deserve an MP that puts the best interests of our great country first, along with our constituents, before the needs of career, party or donors. Politicians delivering is really important. I believe that I have demonstrated by our campaign with the new headquarters here in Sudbury, the banners, the skateboards, the leaflets, the letters, the small new army of volunteers wanting change.
Okay,
That I don't just
Tom,
do... Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
I've got two more sentences, sorry.
very quickly.
I don't do words, I do
Everybody else
action.
has to have 2 more now.
I walk the walk, not talk the talk. I've been blown away by the support I've had for the campaign so far. One lady in her 80s offered to help deliver, even though she's had a 3-wheel trolley and Parkinson's. She's fed up and wants a better country for us all. And so do I, and I believe so do you. You just need to vote for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony.
Sorry to overrun.
Not sure you get the trains here on time. So we'll move on to Emma Bishton, please, from Labour. If you would like to introduce yourself, please, Emma.
Thank you very much. I'm Emma Bishton, and I'm here representing the Labour Party. And can you hear me properly at the back? Lovely. Thank you very much. Excuse me. So I've lived here in South Suffolk for the last 25 years. I've raised my family here, and my children went to our local schools. I've worked in the NHS for a lot of that time, firstly with people with learning disabilities and then in public health. But these days, I mostly work as a community musician, so I help people of all ages to make music in lots of different contexts, and I teach in local state schools. I have stood as the Labour candidate for South Suffolk twice before. I'm a campaigner. I'm used to listening to people's concerns and taking action, most often, but not exclusively, on education issues, and that could be locally or nationally. I'm used to using the experience and knowledge that I've gained from delivering public health services and from teaching in schools to make links, to understand what needs to be done, and to support individuals when they need that support. Now, I want to do that as your MP. And whether as a Labour activist or as a community member, I do have a history of rolling up my sleeves and getting involved in any number of ways. So, for example, as a school governor, or as a member of a community energy project, or supporting our local libraries. And I'm standing again to be your MP because of my commitment to serving this community, my love and knowledge of the area, my experience in understanding of public services, and my belief in the principles and values of the Labour movement. And actually, at this point in time, I'm quite excited because we do stand on the verge of a potential Labour victory in Suffolk and across the country. So you might ask, how would that transform anything? Well, actually, firstly, by bringing back hope. And Labour is the only party that's able to do that. Your only other option here is the Tories, and we've tried them. So Labour are the only party with a credible, achievable plan, and we are promising only what we know we can actually deliver. Polls may shift, but all the polls, and I'm sorry, Tom, but all the polls and the last 3 general elections consistently show that it's only Labour who can actually beat the Tories here. So, how would I make South Suffolk a better place to live and work? 2 ways in particular, I think. Firstly, by understanding the area, by getting better to know the people of the area, to getting to know you, to getting to know community groups, organisations, businesses, and the local authorities that are here. Understanding your challenges, your hopes, and your concerns. And your concerns are many. We've just heard many of them, and we know that, for example, people are having to access food banks because of the cost of food, even when people are working. We know that, for example, in South Suffolk, 61% of residents last year were concerned that they wouldn't be able to pay their energy bills, and 36% of our residents in Suffolk don't even have mains gas. So there are a lot of things, as well as the state of our public services, about which people feel very despondent. So. And then there's, not to mention other things like pylons, for example, special educational needs, difficulty recruiting seasonal workers for our farms, and huge challenges accessing social care. And actually, none of us live in silos. People need to access many of these things, often all at the same time, so often interact with bits of the system on multiple occasions and feel terribly frustrated when things aren't working as they are now after 14 years of Tory failure. So, how would I? Secondly, how would I? Build that trust, by building trust. I beg your pardon. So, Labour is promising what we know we can currently afford to deliver. So, if you want the proof of that, look at our first 6 steps. These are actions that the Labour government is ready and willing and wanting to take on day 1 of the Labour government, and they're costed. They're there, they're planned for, the teams behind them have been working on these things for a very long time. We know what we can do, and we're not looking to make promises that we can't keep. Because Labour are the party of honesty and integrity. We are not over-promising, we are promising what we can deliver in a costed and funded way. After all, politics isn't a game of monopoly, it's about people's lives. So it's time for Labour to turn that tide of despondency, to improve our living standards, and to bring back hope here in South Suffolk and across the country. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. And I would say to candidates that have been asked to speak for 5 minutes, if you don't want to speak for 5 minutes, you don't have to. We'd be quite happy to hear whatever. But so we'll move on to Jessie Carter, who is standing for the Green Party.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me? Fantastic. So thank you very much for coming on this beautiful Wednesday evening. I'm sure you have much better places to be. So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Jessie Carter, and I am standing as your Green Party candidate. I'm very pleased to be here, to be able to speak to you, and I'm also very honoured to have been chosen to stand. It is something I will remember forever. So I've had the privilege of serving the local community as Sudbury's councillor for 3 years on Suffolk County Council, Sudbury Town Council, and for a year at Baber District Council, and also your cabinet member for housing at Baber. I have lived in South Suffolk for most of my life, so I know the challenges that it has had and the challenges yet to come, the challenges it's going through, but also the potential of the area, of what it could be, of what it was, and bringing it back to that, how everyone wants it to be. So I lived in Ipswich for a short while, but moved back after my partner got custody of his children, because we knew that this was the place that we wanted to raise our family. And as a parent of 6, spanning across all ages of the education system, it's their well-being that inspires me and drives my commitment for creating a sustainable, prosperous and inclusive community for them and for all our children. So I decided to run to become a councillor, to be a voice for you, to represent you, people who weren't feeling represented, feeling like your voice wasn't being heard. I wanted to champion your wishes and your views and to work tirelessly to improve all of our daily lives. So over my tenure as councillor, I've focused on key issues such as improving local services, cleaning up the river, holding those accountable, enhancing public transport, the cost of living, and improving our social housing stock, and ensuring that new houses built are what and where people want and need. I'm also the first housing cabinet member to be a social housing tenant, so I can relate to a lot of the people that I speak to. I know what they're going through, and I think they appreciate that relatability. So before becoming a councillor, I spent about a decade self-employed. I started off as a market stall trader. I went on to have a catering stall, and after many very cold, very early mornings, I finally managed to get a shop premises. There were good days as well, but when you're working on that motivation to try and get a shop, it's definitely the cold days that you remember. Firstly, I had a shop in Ipswich, and then we moved to Sudbury, and I will mention now that one of those incentives to moving to Sudbury was the free parking, because what a thing to be able to offer your customers, but that is something that I continue to fight at a cabinet level. So my experiences as a small business owner have given me a deep understanding of the crucial role that small businesses play. I know firsthand the struggles and challenges faced by small business owners, navigating hurdles to ensuring financial stability. And the Green Party manifesto outlines several key initiatives that resonate strongly with my own experiences. So I, as others, have been asked to answer how I will make South Suffolk a better place to work and live. And I'm really thankful to have this opportunity to tell you tonight that I will do what I have been doing the past 3 years. I will work to serve you, along with my fellow Green councillors who have also been working to serve you, as we won at the district elections, proving that it's not just the main 2 parties. You do have an alternative, and you've voted for us. And I want to emphasise the importance of community engagement. As a councillor, I've always believed in the power of listening and working with you, with the community, and that is my promise to you. To be honest, to be transparent, so you will know what I'm doing. You will know what I am fighting for, because that is what you're asking of me. It's not my party that will be serving you. It is me, if I'm elected as your MP. So after speaking to people in emails, phone calls, on the doorstep, when you invite me inside, and much to my children's annoyance on the street. I don't mind being stopped when I'm out, even if I'm running late. I'll always stop and listen to your issues and your concerns and your ideas. I know what you're worried about. I know you're worried about the NHS, the cost of living, public services. Just to name a few, I will hurry up because I'm being rushed. The list goes on, but that is my promise to you. That is what I will do to make South Suffolk a better place. I will do what you want. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessie. Thanks very much. And now over to James Cartlidge, who you will all know. And
well, just in case the sound system has been rigged, can I just check you can all hear me at the back? Super, thank you. So look, an absolute pleasure to be here. James Cartlidge has been the MP for South Suffolk since 2015 until Parliament was dissolved, much to my surprise, I must say. But if I may say, before kicking off, it is an incredible privilege to be here, and I'm grateful to Ali because being the MP, to see the transformation of this venue into something we can all be proud of in Sudbury, I think it's an amazing place. I held a jobs fair back here in March. It was incredibly successful. We had an amazing turnout and the team did brilliantly. So I'm grateful to them for hosting tonight, and to the police for attending, and everyone who's helped to organise it. And it's a privilege to be here with my fellow panellists. To the question of how to make South Suffolk a better place to live and work, I think there are really two aspects to answering this. The first is national and the second is local, because whoever is elected and has that great privilege to be part of a government of the day, and in terms of national policies, we do have to recognise that in this Parliament we've had two of the most extraordinary events in our history since the Second World War. We've had a pandemic, and on the very day it legally finished, the 24th of February 2022, Vladimir Putin invaded Ukraine. So it's been an extraordinary time. And what that left us with, when I knock on doors, the impact people felt is cost of living, which Jessie was referring to as well. This huge spike in prices, which we haven't known as a generation for an awful long time. Butter, bread, everything becoming more expensive. How do you deal with something like that nationally as a government? Actually, it's very difficult, because the most important thing you have to do is to be able to say no. Because when inflation is high, you have to work with the Bank of England, you've got to put interest rates up, which is tough. And in government, in what we call fiscal policy, which is tax and spend, you have to have it tight. So when you have people on strike, because of inflation wanting higher public sector pay, you have to resist and have more reasonable offers. Otherwise, inflation stays high. But the wonderful news is today, as the sun is shining, we're back to 2% on inflation. That's fantastic news and shows that we are going in the right direction as a country economically. In terms of the local measures, as an MP, you are also a constituency representative, and it's been a great privilege to me. Whatever happens, I'll be incredibly proud of these 9 years. And I would point to one area that I'm particularly passionate about, which is skills and education, because there is a real issue in the country, which is, you know, when we have the jobs fair, local firms come here, they're struggling to find people with the right skills. And I look locally, I'm very proud of the fact that since 2010, the percentage of schools that are good or outstanding has gone from 68% to 90%. It's an incredible improvement. But my kids have been, one of them's at TGS, one recently left to go to Colchester College. TGS got this fantastic new building which has enabled it to really flourish. Ormiston is a good school, but Ormiston Academy desperately needs a rebuild. And I've fought for that, personally fought for it, and we've got tens of millions of pounds. They won't let me say the official figure because of the tender. Tens of millions of pounds committed for a new rebuild of Sudbury Ormiston Sudbury Academy. What I want is a town with two fantastic secondary schools with the best facilities, so that we give our local children the best possible opportunity in life. And I'll make this point finally. There's a lot of controversy about immigration at the moment, but I'll just say this: we will never cut it sustainably unless we have a local workforce that is highly skilled and able to fill the jobs that often we rely on migrants for. So we need to drive skills and apprenticeships and opportunity, and I guess that's the issue I feel most passionate about. To have a good place to live and work, we have to have a place that offers opportunity on our doorstep, and that is my commitment to you.
Thank you. Still got another minute. Like I said, you've still got another minute, but that's fine. Brilliant, thank you. And now we'll move to Beverly, England, who's here with Reform. So Beverly, how will you make South Suffolk a better place to live and work? Thank you.
Good evening. This is my first ever live hosting, so I'm the newbie on the block, and like you, it's a bit of a daunting experience. Can you hear?
No, it's not.
Just move it.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
right. So this is my first live hustings, and I'm representing Reform UK. I find this it's not my natural environment to be in. I'm an interior designer. I've never really put myself forward to be front and foremost in politics. I'm a mum, I've run a business, I live in this area, I've only lived here just under a year. I am actually naturally a Conservative voter. I'm a Brexiteer, and I really appreciate and want liberty, freedom of speech and democracy. And that's why I'm standing, because I feel these things are being eroded. Christian Terez is an MEP from Romania, and he says that when you know everything about government, that is democracy, and when the government knows everything about you, that is tyranny. And I agree with him on that. I'm standing for reform because I think they've got common sense policies. Most of the candidates are business people, and in particular, we're very aware of some ideas coming through politics and business that are coming via the World Economic Forum, such as things like central bank digital currency, and I am not prepared to put up with these ideologies coming from Davos and the hypocrisy of what they talk about in Davos. People actually see that we're being preached one thing and that the elite are doing something completely different. Like everyone in the country, I'm fed up with what's been going on for the last few years, and I'm fed up with being blackmailed to vote for either one main party or the other. So in this general election, you do actually have a chance to vote for someone else. And if you don't like all of our policies, I'm actually saying no more is this left, right, leave, remain. We, the people in Great Britain, need to stand up and get our country back and put it back on track economically, so that then there's enough money to pay for all the infrastructure and benefit systems that we really, really need. A couple of people that live in the area made comments to me which really strike home. For instance, there is a local man that lives in South Suffolk. He's a London firefighter. And he says because of ULEZ, it's now costing him £12.50 to go to work every day. And he needs a knee operation. He can't get the knee operation for another year, even though he's paid into the system forever. Another villager spoke to me that the infrastructure is falling apart. The road collapsed 7 months ago and it's still not being fixed. The village shop is shut. I mean, it goes on and on. Another resident has got a sick child. He's in a rented accommodation. He can't get on the housing ladder. And yet he's fed up when he sees a lot of people come to the country that haven't paid into the system are getting benefits. So he's seeing the amount of money and waste, and he's rightly fed up with it. But anyway, I'll go on to the question, which is how I would make Suffolk a better place. This is a beautiful, beautiful part of the country. We're very lucky to be living here. I would actually want to stop green agricultural land being covered in solar panels and housing. I also want to stop the pylons and or trenching coming down from Norwich to Tilbury. I think that the better solution would be offshore. I want to stop pollution. This is hardly discussed, it's overshadowed by climate change, but pollution could stop tomorrow if there was a will to stop it. The infrastructure in this area needs to be explored, and the possibility of train links being open from Melford, Clare, Haverhill, Barton, and possibly through to Stansted. I think that would be a good thing, environmentally friendly, and to get cars off the road and use the trains.
Beverly, sorry, yes. We've just got a couple more sentences like everyone else, that would be great.
The Delphi site needs regeneration with a mix of housing, small business units, sports for youth, and I'd want to protect free parking in Sudbury and the local villages where there are retail shops. Sorry, I thought I was...
Yeah, no, it's fine. It's fine.
Thank you. That's what
Thank you. Thank you. So, James, our amazing tech whiz, says just get a bit closer to your microphones when you speak. It would be better. Thank you. So part two of that's part one. They've all introduced themselves and answered that question in different ways. Thank you very much. And also, I did email the candidates before and said, please try to stick to what you will do rather than bashing the others, just as much as I asked you to be gentle on the candidates. So as we continue, please be gentle to each other. For part two, I looked at some aggregate polling around what the key voter issues are nationally, and I've taken the top 5 of those, and they're going to. Some of you have sent questions in, and those questions are going to be asked. So I just want to make it clear: these aren't my questions; they are your questions. Okay. So just for me to maintain that political neutrality, and these words are coming from the mouths of people in the audience. So the 5 key voter issues that were identified was the economy, including the cost of living and taxation, the health, NHS care services and funding was the second thing. The third thing was immigration and asylum. 4th, environment and climate change. And 5th was housing. So that's the national picture. That's what's important over these aggregate polls to the nation. What I was quite interested in hearing then was James talking about it quite passionately about the education and others, and Jessie, and it's all talking about how we need to make this place better for our children. And interestingly, though, education was not in that top 5 list of priorities. So, and it was aggregate polling, so it's not just one side or another. But I thought that was quite interesting. So I just want to do one show of hands from the audience, and that is, and don't feel embarrassed not to put your hand up to this, but is education really important to you?
Oh, sorry.
So probably, obviously, ignore them. So that's not everybody, so that's quite interesting, but probably about 3/4, just over, between half and 3/4 of you say that. So I don't know if that means education's really working brilliantly, so nobody's that worried, or, anyway. So we'll start with the first question, which is under economy and the cost of living and taxation. I'm not going to out you for asking the questions, okay? If you want to put your hand up, if you recognise it as your question, that's fine. So the economy and cost of living and taxation. So remember, this is somebody's view, okay? Given the vast inequality in wealth in the UK and how unearned income of the wealthy is taxed, to such a low level, what would the candidates, all their parties, do to tax the wealthy properly? You might not agree, you might think they are being taxed properly, but we'd like to hear from you on that, and this time we'll just start at the other end, if you don't mind, Beverly.
Okay.
Thank you.
I didn't quite understand the question because it said unearned income and not unearned wealth, but at some point it would have been earned and taxed. So, but I think Reform UK think the tax system needs simplifying, and large corporations need to pay their share of taxes, the same as small, medium enterprises do. And then perhaps at the moment we should boycott businesses which evade tax, and the big six are Amazon, Starbucks, Facebook, Google, Apple and eBay. Legislation needs changing to stop the loopholes. COVID saw the biggest transfer of wealth from small businesses who folded to large corporations. COVID-related goods and services made 40 new billionaires. They joined the 2,168 existing billionaires in the world. And large companies like Amazon, profits soared to 220%. So I do feel that these big corporations that are maybe registering in Ireland should be paying tax here in the UK, but that there needs to be legislation to make them do that. It's very emotive to say to tax the very wealthy, because they will just up sticks and leave, and then we'll get no taxes from them whatsoever. And there needs to be a balance, and some of these extremely wealthy individuals do employ a lot of people. So you can't just say it's a tax loophole that needs to be changed. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, thank you. So the other thing that I would add is it's not a debate, so we are just, it's very straightforward. This is the question, this is the answer, so thank you. James, please.
Thank you. And I mean, it's important to stress the top 1% pay 30% of all tax revenues in the UK. Now, you know, perfectly reasonable argument. This has been an issue debated since the dawn of time about the wealthy paying more on what you would call unearned income. So I would make two key points on that. The first is that there is, to be fair, as Bev said, there is always a risk that if you set the tax levels too high, you actually get less revenue, or certainly you disincentivise the kind of investment we want to see in our economy to drive the magic word, because whatever happens with the next government, whoever forms it, the thing they're going to want is the P word, the magic word, productivity growth, because it's that which enables the economy to grow without inflation going up and hitting the cost of living. So we need investment into productivity, into machinery, digital, etc. So you don't want to set the tax at a level that disincentivises that. What is important, and again, as Bev said, is about closing loopholes. I think it's a really good point. And actually, we've got a real success story here. I'm sure you all listened to when I was on Any Questions recently. Sitting next to me was Paul Johnson from the IFS. He said we'd had a good job. There's something called the tax gap. The tax gap is essentially the measure of the amount of the difference between the revenue the government raises today and what it would raise if 100% of all the theoretical tax revenue was received. And we've reduced that from about 7.5% to 5%, which may not sound a lot, but it's a massive increase, and it's saved us billions. And we think there's about a further 6 billion you can reduce the gap by. So that's really important. Finally, I would just say that, you know, if you're going to, the question actually had 100 billion. I think you said that, Ali. The figure in the question was to raise 100 billion pounds. To raise that sort of money from wealth taxes, understand that in almost the greatest percentage of that by far will be property, and a lot of it will be residential property. And I would question politically how viable that is, and B, actually how fair that is when you think people have spent their lives paying off their mortgages, building up that. There's a terribly sexy saying that an Englishman's home is his castle. I think that the country wouldn't welcome that. So just be careful what you wish for on putting up those wealth taxes.
Thank you. Just I forgot to tell you, you've got 2 minutes each on this, max, because you all want to go home.
Definitely.
On to Jessie. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the The Green Party are committed to the vast inequality in the wealth in the UK. So if I can give you a figure, in 2020, the wealthiest 10% of households held about half of all the wealth in Great Britain, and that imbalance is crippling to the economy. As wealth in assets, it doesn't circulate. And while our public services are starved for investment, the number of billionaires in the UK has soared from nearly 30 to over 170 over the past 14 years. So I will champion significant tax reforms to create a fairer system, aligning tax rates on all income and investment gains and taxing excessive wealth. We, my party and myself, have nothing against people doing well for themselves and reaping the benefits of hard work. But whilst there are those using food banks, whilst there are veterans on the street, whilst there are people working 40 hours a week and still needing that benefit top-up to survive, we must make sure that our society's tax system is based in fairness and inequality. And so therefore my party is proposing a very modest and affordable 1% annual tax
Jessie, can you just...
on assets above,
Thank you.
10 million. And again, a very modest and affordable 2% tax on assets above 1 billion. And this tax would affect fewer than 1% of UK households, but it would benefit everyone and would raise billions year by year by the end of next Parliament. So you say, it's been mentioned that with this they might just up and leave. They might say, no, I don't want to pay it. Well, if you're not going to pay your fair share, why would we want you here? Why would we want you not paying in your fair amount? There are people waiting to be the next millionaires, to be the next multi-millionaires, the billionaires. So let someone paying their fair share who is going to. Thank you.
Thank you, Jessie.
Emma. Thank you. Here's what Labour's going to do. We're actually going to grow the economy so that we can actually see that growth, and we're going to establish a national wealth fund to unlock the investment and create jobs that will actually even out some of that playing field. And what we are also going to do is make those who should pay more do so. That includes tightening up non-dom rules, introducing a proper windfall tax on oil and gas companies, closing tax loopholes on private equity bosses, and applying VAT and business rates to private schools. These are things we can do. We know how much money they're going to raise. We know what we're going to do with the money that is raised by those taxes. That doesn't scare the horses. It basically commits, what we have committed to is keeping the economy going by growing, by that P word actually that you mentioned, James, quite important. That's where the National Wealth Fund will come into things. That we grow productivity, we invest in growth, and we even out some of those inequalities that you have quite rightly referred to. We do all this without increasing taxes on working families, without raising taxes, without raising VAT, and without raising national insurance. Because actually what we need is some stability in our economy. So that's our plan, and that's what we're looking forward to delivering. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom, thank you.
Thank you. There's no question that inequality has grown significantly over the last few years, mostly through a very long cycle of super low interest rates, boosting asset prices significantly to the benefit of their owners. This has considerably, disproportionately benefited the few rather than the many. So with this in mind, the Liberal Democrats are proposing to reform capital gains tax, to increase it, but bring it in line with earned income. And we think that's a fair way of taxing unearned income in the same way that people who have to work every day earn their income. Now that'll raise about £5.2 billion to be spent on providing local health services for everyone. And we think that's a really important way of trying to level the playing field and make it fairer. That's it.
Thank you. So I wasn't quite sure where to put the next question. So given we're in economy, because it does talk about job opportunities. So, but really, this is one of those ones that I'd quite like a yes/no answer on, if possible. Even though are you complaining about that? Would you rather not do yes?
I saved my minute for my opening 5 so that I've got an extra one on this.
Oh no, we don't. It doesn't work like that.
Oh, no, you can't carry it.
Well, I mean, you can answer in more detail, but I think that just it depends how long you want to be here tonight, okay, basically. So this person would like to know if any party would, and I think we've had the answer already from one, I'd like to know if any party would look at reinstating or at least investigate the possibility of a rail connection from Sudbury to Cambridge, and as it used to be before the Beeching cuts. And then I've just cut a little bit out because it's quite a long question. And this could create local jobs within the railway, improve job opportunities and education opportunities elsewhere, and increase tourists to our local area, helping to grow the local economy. So will you be looking to bring that back? But the last part of the question was quite a long question, is would you be looking to improve public transport? What ideas do you have? So, succinct as you like, I think, is the answer. So we'll start with Tom again, if that's okay.
Yeah, thanks, Ali. I'm going to have to declare a personal interest here because, unfortunately, if that was the case, it would actually go through my back garden because actually my field is right next to the Treble railway station, and the line actually would go through it. So British Rail, or Network Rail as they are, actually have an option to buy my field if that's the case. So I'm going to have to prove whether I'm a real NIMBY or not on this one. So it is a problem for me. But anyway, that's beside the point. What I think is important is we absolutely need investment in infrastructure, and transport infrastructure in particular. My challenge to going backwards to railways that are being pulled up, I think is a mistake. I think we should be looking at being more modern about how we have, well, it's just too complicated. I think HS2 has showed that actually it's really, really difficult to do those kind of railway infrastructure projects, and that's even when they already got lines running. But we absolutely need to invest in our transport for the future. So whether that's in driverless cars or whether it's in areas that we think we can be world leaders, rather than looking backwards, that they need to be environmentally friendly, but they also need to be actually fit for the future, rather than try and drive a railway through what is probably a very challenging place to get it done. It will be bogged down for years. And actually, the local railway museum did ask me if I'd have the run the steam trains through my field, and I actually said yes, but only if you can get it past Network Rail first. And I think that's unlikely. So that's my answer to the question. Absolutely, we need to invest in our infrastructure. Absolutely, we need to be investing in the future, though.
Thank you. Emma?
Thank you. Yes, as you may have heard, Labour is indeed committed to investing in infrastructure projects and into the planning and to reforming the planning framework so that actually infrastructure projects can actually be built within the time frame that they're needed. Whether this would be one of them, I can't say. My job, as I was running in my initial piece as your MP, would be to listen to your ideas and actually to say, do we take this somewhere? Where do we go with this? How does this fit with what else is going on locally? Sudbury is a great place ripe for investment, which is, just to be a bit downer just for a moment, why it is such a shame that 4 years after Delphi closed, it's still waiting. We're still waiting to find out what will actually be happening there. So, you know, Sudbury is ripe for investment. We're only an hour's drive from Cambridge, for example. There's a national train link to London. So, you know, there's lots of opportunities here. My job as your MP would be to listen to what your ideas are, see what works, what gets taken forward to national government, and where we go from there. On the actual specifics of this question, I can't answer directly, but I can tell you that actually Labour is very committed to public transport, to improving our bus networks, to improving our train networks in particular, and of course, as you may have heard, from bringing back our railways into public ownership with the installation of Great British Railways. That brings track and trains together so that actually we can have a more coherent and a better planned system that works better for individuals. So yes, we need trains for people and for the planet. So yes to trains. Not sure, as yet, to the specifics of this particular question.
Thank you. Jessie?
So as the county councillor for Sudbury, I am daily contacted about public transport and how can it be improved and why didn't my bus show up. So I understand the critical state that the public transport system is in. And even if it does run through Tom's garden, perhaps it should be looked at. I wholeheartedly support looking at any possible option to make public transport better, to make it work. It is so convenient for so many of us just to get on a train to go to work rather than being stuck in a traffic jam. So I will say, I'm in Cockfield, and although there is a bus that goes along the edge of the village, inside the village we get a bus once on a Wednesday that will take you into Bury, but it won't bring you back again. However, there's a very nice disused train station, which would save me so much time driving my kids backwards and forwards everywhere if I could just put them on a train and know that they'd be fine. So myself, the Green Party, we are hugely in favour of public transport, and there may be difficulties, but we have to look into it, and we have to make sure that people can get from A to B, they can get home again, that it doesn't cost the earth, and free up a bit of their time. So, thank you.
Thanks. Okay. James.
So just a reminder, the specific question is whether to take our wonderful line to Sudbury and reinstate what it used to do, which it used to go to Long Melford, and then it split. And one side went to Clare and on to Cambridge, and the other side went to Cockfield, Lavenham, Cockfield and Bury St Edmunds. Now, the reason I love this question, I don't know if the person is the one who corresponded with me on this quite early when I'd been first elected, but my family didn't have a car, we were brought up in a train family. When I moved here, I loved the little branch line, and if you like, sentimentally, how magical it would be to restore those journeys. It must have been one of the most beautiful train journeys to get the train through to Clare or to, through Cockfield to Lavenham. These would be beautiful. I'm afraid, I don't think for one moment it would be practicable or affordable, and would come with expectations of very large housing around it. That's assuming you could still get the land. And don't forget, you give something up. The most beautiful walks, or some of them, or cycle routes around here, are the old railway walks through Sudbury, from Hadley, the old Hadley station, and indeed at Cockfield, there's one to the Horseshoes pub there from the old station. So you would be giving something up as well. I suspect it's not economic, and I don't say that, maliciously. It's just my sense, I'm afraid. So the wider point is on that railway. We used to have a diesel train built in about 1812 that once broke down because of leaves on the line, and I had this debate in the Commons called Leafgate. It was so shocking. But we now have these wonderful new trains which we pushed really hard for. I don't think they break down because of leaves on the line, and I do think we have a much better service, and definitely want to continue to improve it.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Right, I think it's a brilliant idea, and I think it would make sense to connect these villages again, and it's good for the environment, and it would provide jobs and help businesses as well. And Reform UK want to scrap the rest of the HS2 bill and save another 25 billion, and we want to accelerate transport and infrastructure, overhaul and merge the National Infrastructure Commission and the Infrastructure Bank, simplify the funding process to save time, cut waste, boost funding and accountability. I'm not quite sure how this would be funded, but it's something that we would want to encourage, this type of public transport, but I would be against it being funded with something like a PFI, Public Finance Initiatives, which was pushed through by the Blair government, and there's hundreds and hundreds of contracts where the private sector is actually fleecing the taxpayer on these PFIs, so I would not want it to go that route. It would have to be properly costed, but I do think in essence it's a good idea.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm quite glad that just wasn't a yes/no, because that was quite informative. Thank you, everybody. The next question, and again, just 2 minutes, everybody, at maximum, but The next question has come from somebody who would like to ask the candidates their views on the plans for the introduction of a central bank digital currency. If you have no views, feel free to say that too. So, okay, which end did we start last time, I think? So it's back to, yeah, thank you.
One of the main reasons I joined Reform UK and want to stand for them is I'm absolutely opposed to central bank digital currency. Rishi Sunak was the poster boy for this when he was Chancellor, and he was making it sound that it was trendy, like a Britcoin, but a Bitcoin. It's no such thing. It's a state-controlled money token. And what none of you will realise is that last year, the HM Treasury set out a consultation paper, but they kept it very quiet. They didn't want any of you to know about it, because they knew that if you all knew about it, you'd absolutely object to it. So they only got about 50,000 objections. It is a state-controlled money token where the state will be able to control how you spend your money. And the EU have already completed phase 1 of CBDCs. And the EU are already phasing out cash. So I'm glad that we're out of the EU, because it's sinking to a sort of a dictatorship. In the EU now, if you spend €1,000 cash of your own money, Christine Lagarde has said on video, you are then in the grey zone, you can be fined or sent to prison. That is not this type of world that I want to live in. The state is on camera. She has said that. And so central bank digital currencies are crucial to stop. And if it's introduced and you don't put up anything to oppose it, it will come, and then it will be too late. So you have to stand up now and find out about it and say that you absolutely don't want it. And it actually isn't a laughing matter. But thanks.
Thank you, Beverly. Thanks.
I mean, it hasn't been raised on the doorsteps yet, very much, this one. We do have a consultation about it. It's sort of mid-process. I suspect that whoever the new government is would continue it. I don't think there's been any attempt to sort of suppress its publication, and it's certainly nothing to do with the end of cash. It's exploring what could be a significant innovation for our economy. The city remains a big part of our economy. Services are huge. But the point is, when you have a consultation, you do listen to the feedback you get. And I think we should be a bit more balanced about what is actually being attempted here, which is simply something that would strengthen our economy, potentially.
Thank you. Jessie?
Thank you. I would echo James that this isn't one that I've had a discussion about recently. But one of the design principles is that the transaction shouldn't be traceable, and you should be able to spend your digital currency just like your banknotes, and no one should be able to know when and how. And it was never intended to replace cash, but to enhance it. And as long as that is the case, and it doesn't replace cash, then I'm quite happy for people to have more spending options. I don't, under any circumstances, want to see a cashless society, and I will always fight to keep cash in circulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I'd simply say that as your MP, that's a decision I would ask for guidance on, and also that it's the kind of decision that we made by our Treasury team, and I have absolute faith in Rachel Reeves and the team behind her, who have been working out all the detail on all of these things for quite some time.
Thank you. Tom?
Okay, well, actually, I mean, obviously somebody did ask me on the doorstep, so I've got a copy of the printout here, and it wasn't hidden. No, honestly, I mean, I think it's one of those things that, you know, we have to look at the future. It's really important. I think we still want cash. I would actually say with Emma that, you know, one has to rely on experts. I think what did Michael Gove say? He said everyone's had enough of experts. Personally, I think everyone's had enough of politicians. So with that in mind, I would absolutely refer to the experts, and I think that we have to look at the future in terms of managing it, but I just don't think it's a major issue for most of the people in this room or in this constituency. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to health, NHS care services funding. which was the most popular area for people to send their questions in. So, I mean, still only 4. It's quite interesting that 100 people got tickets, and in the grand scheme of things, not many people ask questions. But I think probably because they just want to hear the answers to everybody else's. And sorry?
I said you didn't get time.
You didn't get time? Okay. Anyway, everybody had the same opportunity to ask a question. So, with health and NHS care services, the first 2 questions really that have been submitted are pretty much the same. So, question 1, I worked as a GP for nearly 30 years. I now despair at the state of general practice. How will the candidates restore a responsive, high-quality system of primary care? And the second question, at the moment, it's almost impossible to get a GP appointment, let alone something more serious. What would you do to rectify this? I mean, arguably, the third question is about dentistry, but I think I'll keep that one separate. Okay, so this is about seeing a GP or getting operations. So, Tom, please, first.
Okay, thank you. I think I addressed the point in my opening speech, but I think one of the things I've done personally is to try and educate myself about what healthcare issues really are. So a number of you may know that I actually wrote to all the doctors and all the GPs in the constituency a number of weeks ago, and I asked to see them if they could spare me the time, which they have kindly done. Dr. Bone, which is normative determinism at its best. You know, I thought he was an orthopaedic surgeon, but anyway, it's kind of a joke. But anyway, Dr. Bone was really helpful in explaining to me actually what it's really like to be a GP. And I think that we've seen some real challenges, and a few of the things that obviously we need to do to fix the GPs' lives, essentially, include training more of them, really simple. He suggested also that we should be actually maybe lowering the grades a little bit of doctors so that we can get more people in, provide more training places. But also, interestingly, it was some of the things that don't require more money that were really interesting to me that he explained to me. The culture in the NHS is that actually consultants are king of the hill. GPs are kind of viewed as second-class citizens, and therefore the doctors that are training are coming out of their training periods and thinking, right, well, I want to be a consultant and I want to be, you know, king of the hill, and actually, GP, that's not for me, really, is it? And so therefore, one of the things that I think we can do really quite simply is change the culture around GPs and make it an attractive place. And that doesn't necessarily mean more money, but an attractive place for people to actually train and go into. And that's a really important piece of some of the work I think we all need to do in understanding how we can help improve our GPs' experiences and therefore the outcomes for our patients. And that's a really, really important thing. And that's in addition, obviously, to what I said about the 8,000 extra GPs and some timescales around how you can see them. So that's what I would certainly try and work on with everybody here.
Thank you. Emma.
Thank you. If you've worked as a GP for 30 years, then you've seen quite a lot of NHS reorganisations. So, but obviously at the moment, GPs often bear the brunt of people's dissatisfaction with the NHS. You can't get an appointment, you can't get through the phone system, so you can't get an appointment. And when you get an appointment, is it with the person that you want it to be? There are some fixes, and there are some, but some of the fixes that you might hear are not actually that easy to put into practice. So we can fix things like the access system to appointments. So one of the things in Labour's manifesto is actually about changing the appointment system, because I'm sure that many of you here have had that 8 o'clock frustration with trying to sit on a phone call and there's 50 people waiting in front of you, or then you get bumped off the list and you come on again. And that, so fixing that's actually one of the things in our manifesto, because that would solve one of the most immediate frustrations in the first place. Training more GPs sounds fantastic. We would all like to train more GPs, but actually training more doctors requires more hospital placements, it requires a whole load of infrastructure. What we need to do most is retain the people that we're actually training now. And I was speaking the other day to somebody who has recently retired from running a medical school, and that is one of her most significant concerns, that people come through the medical school and actually then they look at what's available in the NHS and they think, I don't want those stresses, I don't want to deal with working within a system which is not responding to people's needs, and they go elsewhere. What we need to do is make it more attractive for people to actually be here and want to be here providing the care that GPs are uniquely provided to do, which is actually not always to be the person that you need to see at any given point in time, but the person coordinating that care and looking after people's long-term conditions, which in an ageing society are particularly where our focus needs to be at. That and making prevention key and focusing really more on prevention is what will make GPs' lives better in the longer term and really where we need to be heading.
Thank you. Thank you. Jessie?
I think both these questions touch all of us and relatable for all of us. I think we all want this issue addressed. So our healthcare system, it is at breaking point. We all understand the concerns about general practice, and we need to restore it so it's up to high quality. And the Green Party have an excellent plan in place. So we plan to achieve this by significantly increasing the NHS funding. We've put in a very bold and very ambitious but very doable additional $6 billion annually, specifically for primary care. And this would ensure that GP practices have all the resources that they need. And also give them fairer pay. We've talked about attracting more people and making sure that they want to keep their jobs. They need fairer pay. We are saying that we will give them a one-off payoff to make up for the times that we haven't before. We've been really frank and really honest, but we are committed to saving our NHS because no one wants to see the looming possibility of privatisation become a reality. It's fantastic, the fact that you can just call up, and if you do manage to get an appointment, you can go and you can see them, and you don't have to worry about how many bills that's going to cost you later. So I would, with whoever ends up in power, I would push for better and immediate investment in training and recruiting more GPs. And as I mentioned, giving incentives. I will always stand up for all patients to ensure that they can safely access GPs. And using things like digital health technologies wherever possible, and utilising the state of technologies wherever possible. We need to start supporting our GPs and other healthcare staff so that they can provide the care that our community deserves. And we also need to reduce the administration burden. So by the expansion of digital health services to streamline appointments and provide quicker access to care for minor issues. Thank you.
Thanks, Jessie. James?
Thank you, yeah. So I actually agree with Emma. Often people talk about recruitment, but generally the biggest challenges are with retention of your existing trained GPs, which are your key asset. And I think in the constituency, look at some of the challenges we've had. I can think of a particular practice, I won't name it, where the early retirement of a number of GPs had a massive impact. You can imagine the impact that had. And when I spoke to them about it, we sat down, frankly confessed to post-pandemic burnout, to put it bluntly. It's a lot of stress. And so we've obviously got to look at what we can do with that. But actually the other common issue that's raised, funnily enough, my own GP came to see me in my surgery, in my parliamentary surgery, which I thought was quite amusing. But he raised an issue which is raised by a lot of people in the medical profession, which is the tax limit on pensions, because he was saying we can't come and work these extra hours we need to provide more care because we are penalised at an absurd tax rate, which is true. So we have removed that to try and incentivise more people to be NHS consultants, but also general practitioners. And in terms of facilities, again, turning to, I think Jessie was talking about the 8 a.m. scramble, or maybe Emma or both, actually. And Steve Barclay last year, when he was Health Secretary, announced 240 million extra funding. And actually one of our practices along Melford has used this system, which apparently, and there may be people in the room use it, I'm informed, has performed much better than the previous ATM scramble. And finally, obviously it's about capacity. So we have a plan in our manifesto for 250 new or substantially refurbished surgeries to be paid by reducing the number of managers in the NHS.
Thank you. Beverly.
Firstly, I think that the NHS, as well as education, should not be a political football. I think they should be removed from politics and there should be some consensus because they're far too important to be point scoring on those two issues. But Reform want to offer a private healthcare with tax incentives. So if you take up a private healthcare package, if you can afford it, we'll give you a tax incentive. It's to reduce the waiting times, because at the moment we've got about 7.5 million on waiting lists, and it would remove those people out of the NHS. It's not about privatising the NHS, we want it free on the point of delivery. But while there is such a massive backlog, to try and shift that, that's what we want to do. We want to end staff shortages by encouraging those who've left and those who will go into the NHS to come back, and also we would tax them on a zero basic rate tax for 3 years. So that would encourage them and they would see the impact in their pockets. We want to end training caps. I didn't realise till recently there's training caps on how many doctors and nurses we can train, which seems to me preposterous. We need to get rid of those and train up as many as we can. We want patients in charge with a voucher scheme for private consultation if they can't see a GP within 3 days and they can't see a consultant within 3 weeks or an operation 9 weeks. And all these services will be free at point of use. We want to cut waste. We want to make more efficient operating and admin throughout the NHS. And we also want the operating theatres to be open at weekends. We want to review all the NHS private finance contracts, the PFIs, which I mentioned earlier, where we're actually spending far too much money on these contracts. They should never have been approved. We also would possibly want to charge people who fail to turn up to appointments because that's wasting valuable time. And to cut waiting times in A&E, we want pharmacy first, doctor next, A&E as a last resort, and tax incentives again to pharmacists to relieve pressure on the A&E. So we have a plan, but I actually want political consensus on this because it's such a big issue.
Thank you. And then straight to you again, because we're going to come back down. The next question was, what would candidates do to ensure that everyone has access to an NHS dentist? And I wouldn't mind another show of hands, really, to see whether are people still struggling to see a dentist? Some are, some aren't. Okay.
What, NHS or private?
NHS. No. Okay, thank you. So, Beverly, that's the question to you. What would you do to ensure?
I think there's something with the contracts with dentists that's actually preventing them from wanting to work within the NHS. But basically everything that I've said for the NHS in general, whether it's a GP appointment, actually also is relevant to dentistry. So I think it's a crossover there.
Okay, thank you. James?
Bev's actually right. There were a key issue with the contract. I mean, specifically, in our office, we noticed, I don't know the exact point in time, it was some months after the sort of formal end of lockdown, suddenly lots of emails about dentistry from people who hadn't been registered with the dentist, they hadn't been going to them, and suddenly were back out, wanted to have an appointment and had been taken off list. And this sort of perpetuated the initial phase of a realisation that we needed more capacity, and the contract does not incentivise that. There are two specific things. We have our £200 million dental recovery plan, but I think locally in Suffolk, the University of Suffolk has introduced significant extra capacity because until such time as, if you like, there's sufficient on the high street, we have to have additional capacity, and there will be a hub. There is a hub that's been opened at the University of Suffolk in Ipswich for the whole of Suffolk. It's effectively a hub of fully qualified dentists and other oral practitioners to provide the extra capacity which was sorely lacking when we had that period when, I mean, the hands are like they are now. It was much worse then. So there has been some progress, but I do accept we do need to continue to increase access.
Thank you, Jessie.
Thanks. So if I can first of all draw from my own experience when there was a cry out for dentistry within the area. So I actually initiated for the local, but for a dental charity to come to Sudbury where they treated around 500 people for free. It was amazing seeing people going in excruciating pain and coming out all bloodied and bruised, but so relieved that they had finally managed to get a dentist, and some of them were referred elsewhere. But as a representative for you, I will expand on initiatives like this to get immediate support and solutions for local communities to bridge the gap between the dental care access. So the Green Party's approach would be to increase funding for dental services to enhance capacity and improve the accessibility across the communities, ensuring that everyone has the right to a dentist, no matter your age, no matter where you come from. We have an issue in Suffolk, they call it a dentist desert. You just can't get an appointment and you're referred elsewhere, and it takes so long to get to, and that just needs to be stopped. We need to be able to fund them. The same with the GPs. They need to make sure that their wages are okay. They need to make sure that they have the dentists within the facilities, and the nurses too. They need to make sure that they can have the equipment and that they are getting paid correctly per job that they do, rather than as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, firstly, thank you for what you did to make sure that people could have that care when they needed it. It's brilliant to hear, and but it sort of highlights the problem, doesn't it, really? And when the NHS was founded, which I'm sure you all know, quite some while ago, we knew that prevention was better than cure, and nowhere has that come more adrift than in dentistry. And the most common reason for children aged 5 to 9 to be admitted to hospital is to have dental work carried out, which is completely unacceptable. So, like all of us, we can express frustration about it, but we do actually have to do something about it. So what we're going to do about it is, in the first instance, Labour has a dental recovery plan, and that's about putting 700,000 appointments per year back in the dental system. That's whilst we reform the dental contract, because actually it is absolutely about the dental contract. It's about dentists not being able to work, on an economically within the NHS. So that reform is on the table, but in the first instance, we need those appointments each year. It's a costed plan, and it's in our fiscal plan, which is available if you want to go and look at it in our manifesto online. It's funded, it's worked through. We know we can do it, and we know we have to do it. The other thing we have to do is actually look at, further down the line, look at the prevention to stop those children having that dental decay in the first place. Looking at, for example, sugar in drinks. There's been a start, it needs to go a whole load further. But also actually teaching children in schools. Now, this is difficult to do, don't get me wrong. I understand that reception classes aren't full of sinks and lots of, and it takes time, but it's absolutely fundamentally important that children in reception class can learn and be shown how to brush their teeth properly by people who are equipped to show them that. So the plan is urgent appointments, yes, 700,000 a year across the UK per year. A new reform of the dental contract and prevention, working with those children in those schools to get that problem prevented in the first place.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I think we all agree that it's shocking. I mean, some of the headlines: DIY dentistry on the rise, NHS dentistry at breaking point, people pulling out their own teeth. I thought that stopped around here in the 1950s, you know, which was a 21st birthday present for quite a few people in those days around here. So it's a shocking experience. And I think the Lib Dems have put forward a really solid plan in the manifesto, again, costed. And you'll have to excuse me for reading it out, but it's worth a little bit of detail, I think. So, like everybody, we need to reform that and increase the funding, but reforming that contract is essential. But it needs to encourage and incentivise dentists to take on NHS patients, not as it currently does, which is disincentivise them. It needs to meet patient demand rather than arbitrary targets, and it absolutely needs to put an end to these dental deserts. We also need to increase the number of dentist training places in the UK, and we need to continue to recognise EU-trained dentist qualifications so that we can attract them. We need to write into law proper workforce planning for health and social care, and that includes protections for dentists and dental staff. We also need to actually think, and again, it is a sadness, but you know, we agree we need to have supervised toothbrushing for children in early year settings. As essential prevention is absolutely better than the cure. And we also think that we should remove VAT on children's toothbrushes and children's toothpaste, because we think that actually you've got to make it affordable for everybody. And those are the fully costed plans that we have for reforming dentistry in the UK.
Thank you. So I did say that I wasn't going to out anybody on their questions, but I'm going to out somebody on the next question because he deserves to be recognised. And he has relentlessly hounded all of the candidates online, and so he's not actually hiding away. But it's Andy Reid, and Andy, you can put your hand up, Andy. You're still here. You have, well done. So Andy, thank you. Andy, for those that don't know it, he is absolutely a relentless champion of defibrillators, and I think Sudbury has probably got more defibrillators than most towns, and he's passionate about it, and he also encouraged somebody to donate a defibrillator to Sudbury Arts Centre, which we have here, which is an amazing thing, and also, more importantly, he really champions people being trained to give them their confidence to you, because we all see them, but, you know, actually it's quite a scary prospect. So Andy works really, really tirelessly. Yes, please give him a round of applause, because he's a community champion. So thanks, Andy. So Andy's question is a yes or no, and he's been very explicit about that, everybody. So this is repeated, you will have seen this question coming up online and in your emails. Will the candidates support the removal of VAT on defibrillators with just a simple yes or no question?
Yes, if I'm lucky enough to be selected as an MP and I'm asked to legislate it, I will be supportive personally.
Okay, thank you. I hadn't finished the question. But
sorry,
you've read it, so you know.
I did my homework, Ali, to be fair.
Thank you. This is assuming the costing of £20 million lost to the Treasury in revenue is correct. This annual cost includes defibrillators and equipment. So yes or no? Tom's answered, thank you. Emma?
Well, in principle, yes, I would totally support it. We know that, for example, charities funding defibrillators don't have to pay that VAT. Business funding a defibrillator to put it on the outside of their premises so that it's accessible on a 999 call do have to pay that VAT currently. So it would seem certainly to be something that's worth looking at, asking the Treasury team to do, because as you would have heard me say before, we don't commit to tax raises of any sort that aren't actually costed and funded and worked through.
Thank you. Jessie?
Yes, 100%. Who wouldn't?
Thank you. James?
Well, Emma is right. So at the moment, there is no VAT charged on the purchase of defibrillators by charitable organisations or the NHS or those making voluntary donations of them. It is charged in that private context. But I would just very quickly add, we have made £1 million available for communities to bid to have a defibrillator, and I think we've just achieved our target of having one in every school. So we are making lots of progress on making them more available and accessible. But like Emma, I would have to find out from my Treasury team, as it were, if this is affordable within our remit, as it were.
Okay. Beverly?
It kind of makes sense to say yes, not to have it charged, particularly if there's no VAT on other medical equipment. It seems, and if charities are not paying VAT and healthcare institutions not paying VAT, and it's just businesses. I would have thought that the businesses would normally then be able to claw that VAT back. So there's probably only, when you weigh it all up, it's probably a very little amount of money. So it doesn't really make sense to charge VAT, so I would say it should go.
Okay, thank you. Andy, are you happy? A good thumbs up there, I can see. Thank you. And the next, so the next question, as I said, these questions are sent in by people, and I think that some of, you know, the trust and that's gone out of politics, I think most people would agree, is around people having questions that some of us find difficult, maybe, but they do have the right to ask those questions. And I think so, as I said, we haven't really censored any of the questions. We cut one down because it was a bit long. So this is a question on immigration and asylum. It is genuinely a question from somebody who's maybe not here, I don't know, but certainly was had a ticket. So, and I'm going to leave our candidates to kind of answer this the best way they think they should. So, and you might, some people might find it an uncomfortable question, but I think it's important to include everybody. So, with so many young men coming to the UK in boats and being put up in hotels with pocket money, etc., is it fair that our ex-service personnel who have been traumatised by what they have seen and had to do you think this is fair? I think it means, do you think it's fair that young men are coming from other countries and being looked after, and our ex-service personnel maybe aren't? So that was my take on that question. So I think we start with Beverly this time as the first person. Thank you.
I think that there are two types of immigration. There's the legal immigration and there's illegal immigration. And people, when I'm talking to people on the doorsteps, they are struggling with their cost of living, and yet they're realising that the government is spending 7, 8, 9 million a day on economic immigrants, the majority that are coming across in the boats. And they feel that it's unfair, but it's also, it is a fact that those people coming across have paid people traffickers up to €5,000 each, which is an illegal trade, and they are coming from France, which is a safe country, and there are deaths, people are drowning, and we've had 15 deaths so far this year, and it seems to me that people read about a death, oh, there's another migrant that's drowned trying to come to the UK, and okay, and then we forget about it the next day. Well, it shouldn't be forgotten about. That's 15 people that lost their lives that we know of, and the amount of people, it's likely to be much higher. So we want to stop the boats, the same as Australia did when they were having economic migrants from Indonesia. And it is a humanitarian crisis, and I think it should be stopped, to stop the traffickers and to safeguard people, as much as to save taxpayer funding. I don't know how many thousands of people that we're housing at the moment that just are not being processed quickly either. So we would also want to process them quickly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. James.
Thank you. Look, this point is raised actually quite a lot on the doorstep, I have to say, and it is this question encapsulates a sense in which people think it is unfair that those seeking to claim asylum in this country are given money to avoid destitution. Just to explain why that happens, we as a country, and I don't think it's Labour's policy to change this, or any other party should they win the election, our policy is not to allow asylum seekers to work. And the reason for that is because if we did, there'd be a much greater draw and the numbers coming would be far higher. The problem is, if you say to someone, you cannot work, how on earth are they supposed to feed themselves if they don't receive any kind of support to avoid destitution? So that's the reason they receive that support. Obviously, we want to control the levels of it. And to say, and I've had this question, but what about our ex-service people? As a country, I think we venerate our veterans. As a defence minister, I'm clear we have done an enormous amount to support veterans. They have a voice at the cabinet table through Johnny Mercer and his Office of Veterans Affairs. There's a huge number of steps we've taken to give them more access to mental health support and so on. But I do think they are two very different questions. And just finally, on this question of boat crossings, there are lots and lots of misconceptions. I have had many people on the doorstep say to me, why don't the Navy shoot them, right? Why don't they stop them? If the Navy are to intervene in boats crossing the high seas, ultimately they have to be prepared to use lethal force to stop them. That would be murder. And if once that boat is in our waters, we have to deal with it. It is our international duty. But as Bev rightly says, this is a very evil crime. The people doing this are heartless. They don't care if those people drown. I'm afraid we do need, like Australia had, a third country agreement for processing. It would be a deterrent against crossings. The thing about Australia is that other countries agreed to have that. France doesn't. So you have to have a country that agrees to take them for those third-party processing. There's no easy answer. I know the Rwanda policy is controversial, but we have lots of other European countries being talked to us about third country processing. I don't see another alternative than having a deterrent that reduces those crossings and avoids this tragic loss of life that Bev was talking about.
Thank you. Jessie?
If I can start by saying that I think that the treatment of our veterans is neither fair nor is it just. They've made immense sacrifices for all of us, for our country, and it is our moral duty now to make sure that they are properly housed and properly looked after and have all the support that they need. During lockdown, the government demonstrated that housing everybody was a possibility, and proving that with the right commitment and resources, we can achieve housing solutions for everyone. However, going forward, this level of support, it hasn't been continued, it hasn't been sustained, and many veterans and other vulnerable groups continue to face homelessness and inadequate care. So regarding the issue of people arriving to the UK on boats and being housed in hotels, it is crucial to approach the situation with compassion and commitment to human rights. Many of these individuals are fleeing war, persecution and extreme hardship. The failure of continual governments to look after our service personnel is a failure on them and have nothing really to do with the government's failure on processing immigration applications timely. And thus end up having to spend millions on hotels and benefits and handouts. And so the only thing that links these two things is government incompetence.
Thank you. Emma?
Yes, I rather agree. I think these are two separate questions, actually. And I'm glad to hear that James does recognise that the Rwanda policy is, controversial. I think, yes, not only controversial, but a huge waste of public money, which could be put to much better use. So, and not only is it a huge amount of money, and it doesn't even attempt to deal with a fraction of the problem. We'd still have lots of people who make unfathomable choices coming across the channel in small boats or whatever other means that they arrive by. I'm sure that you, like me, can't put yourself in that situation. So we do have an obligation to ensure that people are actually arriving are cared for, absolutely. We also do not want to be sticking a small number of them on the plane and sending them to Rwanda as some kind of grandstanding policy. So instead, we're going to use exactly that money and use it to create a new border security force. And that border security force's job is to actually, stop the traffickers. I don't know if any of you have been listening to a programme on the BBC journalist has done an investigation into a people trafficker called Scorpion. It's extraordinary listening, and I would recommend it to you if you haven't. But that border security force's job will be to actually deal with those people trackers. It will also be, that money will also be used to actually process the vast number of asylum claims left, mounting and mounting over the last 14 years whilst the Tories have been waffling on about Rwanda. So, you know, we have a plan. It's to use that money to do something else to actually support those people properly. And you know, to be fair, because this does come up on the doorstep, I appreciate, where people do not have the right to stay in the UK, to actually be able to be removed safely. So we also need to, you know, to get the people out of the hotels, we need to get them off the boats, and that's our plan for doing that. On the subject of service veterans, So yes, we need to support our service veterans. So one of the first things we're going to do on that is actually enshrine the Armed Forces Covenant into law. That's what protects the needs and provides support for our veterans and their families and their dependents for as long as they need that support. So that's one of the measures that we will be taking to ensure that our veterans get the recognition and the support that they need. Thank you. Tom.
I would actually kind of say that this is one thing that comes up on the doorsteps a lot, but actually I first got involved with it actually from here. Is that on the day of Sudbury on show, there was a veteran, I think it's who asked the question, was doing a sleep out, and I think I was the only person that went over there and tried to listen and understand what it's like to be a service veteran and really understand why they feel totally let down and why they don't think it's fair. And I think it's right, it's two separate issues, but for the service veterans, it's totally a failure of government around looking after the people they need to look after. And actually, the immigration issue is also a failure of government, but for a different set of reasons. And the inhumane grandstanding of Rwandan scheme feels to me a total waste of money. But I think really we have to look at all the nitty-gritty parts of government and just make it work. It's not about who's doing what to whom, it's about doing the good business of government properly, doing what you say you're going to do, process the applications, look after your servicemen properly, and make sure that actually it doesn't feel unfair, but it actually means that the right people are being looked after and the right things are done by our society.
A bit of debate.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say there was a bit of, we are starting, it's not just Tom, it's I've seen it with others, we're just sort of starting to edge into bashing what other people aren't doing, but actually...
Sorry, it's just called debate, don't worry.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I know.
Sorry.
It's debate, but I'm not very good at
I was the only one that
debate.
no one else was pulled up for not answering the yes or no question, which I think is, you know, anyway, but I'll
I gave up, Tom. I gave up.
Well, that's the trouble with politics, really, isn't it? That people need to give a yes or no answer. That they
I
anyway.
think one of the problems with politics is that most answers are not simply yes or no.
Yes,
That's very true.
That is 100% correct.
No, I am.
So we're going to move on to environment. We're not doing too badly, okay? Environment and climate change. We just had the one question, and that was, given that climate change is causing sea levels to rise unpredictably, what are your views on building a nuclear power station almost on the beach and on low-lying grounds? Tom?
Well, I think actually that demonstrates that actually questions aren't that easy to answer, because there's about 5 questions in here that you could talk about, which would be, you know, nuclear power, is it safe? I believe it is, and that we need to use it as a base load for make sure that we can have an independent energy strategy that works for us all without necessarily resorting to oil and gas. But that's, I think, not the question. I think the question is should you then build it on low level? Being in insurance for 30 years of my life, I would always do a risk assessment, and I'd hope the experts had done some risk assessment around flooding and worked it out. You'd like to hope so. So that seems, again, part of that question answered that it's probably unlikely. And then there's a third question in there, is that are sea levels rising because of climate change? And I think that, you know, most of our evidence and expert advice would say that yes, we are experiencing climate change, and that we do need to make sure that we protect our country and build for the future, but also to try and do our bit to prevent that happening. So I think that's 3 questions in one, but I often listen to the experts on these occasions.
Thank you. Emma?
Thank you. Yes, I agree. It's a difficult question, and actually it is the job of government and of your representatives in Parliament to actually make difficult decisions and to make those for the short and the medium and the long term. And too often we get caught up in making very short-term decisions because that's the nature of the electoral cycle. One of the long-term decisions we have to make is that actually we need clean power by 2030. We have committed to doing that. Nuclear power is an essential part of that mix. If we don't have the nuclear power in that mix, we will not reach that goal. And you only have to look at our fields and how flooded they've been in the last year, unusually in East Anglia, to understand that the impacts of climate change are some of them already with us, and we've got to be able to actually reach that net zero. We've got to be able to provide ourselves with actually clean power that's also more secure and that's also cheaper for all families across the country. So it's an uncomfortable decision, but it is one that has actually, in fact, already been made by the Conservative government, that we're just sort of sitting here some while later still debating it, perhaps begs a few questions. One of which, of course, is how we're going to best support the communities in that part of Suffolk and the wildlife and the environment that it will be built on, and ensure that actually in building that power that we need, we can do so causing the least damage to the environment and maximising the potential to the communities that are around it. And that, as your MPs, is the job that we have on your behalf. Thank you.
If I could just take everybody back to 2011 in Fukushima, the disaster that struck out, and still how even a decade later, major challenges still remain. And they think that it will take up to 40 years to decontaminate the area fully. And now that is an extreme case, but even a flood not nearly as large as that could still have horrific consequences, and radiation leaks and long-term damage. You have to think about nuclear power generating hazardous waste that remains dangerous for thousands of years, and like they are looking at in Japan, it is in their water, and they are now having to deal with that. I think there are other options. When you look at the coast, and when you look at renewable, clean sources of energy that are available to us, would we not be better off using them? I think what we need to do is we need to look at what is better for us as a community, as for a country, and not just about what looks good on paper and is convenient.
Thank you.
It's a really interesting question, and I support what Tom said. I mean, frankly, in terms of the actual physical location, you kind of have to assume there was adequate safety checks and all the rest of it. I was on a beach in Sri Lanka when the tsunami struck. It was actually I was on my honeymoon, and to see the power of the sea is quite something. So I'd assume that all that work has been done. But as to the sort of substantive question of nuclear, and further to Jessie's point, which I do respect, but nevertheless, the key word Tom used is baseload. It's about energy security. I'm really proud of the fact that we as a government, we're the first G7 nation to halve our emissions. We've slashed our emissions massively in this country. But what the Putin situation has shown is the issue of energy security as well. And the reason we have a department called DESNES, which I know sounds like a soap opera character, but it's Department of Energy Security and Net Zero, is because on this race to using more renewables, we have a great opportunity to be energy independent. I think that is the most important goal. But you have to have baseload. That's power that you can always have on, because renewables are not 100% guaranteed to be on. Now, there's things you can do. So we have shallow seas off East Anglia. We have a huge amount of offshore wind. You can have floating offshore wind in places like the Celtic Sea with different wind vectors, so the chance of having no wind power become extremely remote. But you need baseload, and if you want it without emissions, nuclear is currently the only key offer that gives you that substantive power, as we've seen in France. So I do accept there are risks in everything, but we've had a very successful nuclear program in the country before. I think we need to revitalise it to give us energy security, reliable energy, and that crucial thing of baseload power around which we can build the amazing development of offshore wind and so on that we have seen.
Thank you. Beverly?
Energy security is essential, and we can't get enough energy from solar and wind in this country. So small nuclear reactors would be vital in providing energy security. And Rolls-Royce can build small reactors here in the UK. So I agree with the others that if they have, I think we're talking about Sizewell C, and that's being near the coast. So you would hope that the safety checks have been done. But it is an emotive thing. You mentioned nuclear, and everyone's first reaction is to say, really, they don't want it. But I think things have moved on. But it would be good to have small nuclear reactors built here in the UK to make sure that we've got energy security.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm going to start at the other end again, Beverly. So the next are two sort of questions in one, very similar.
I think three. I'd say three. Aren't they all? They're all about PR. Three questions.
Oh, maybe I've rolled them into two. So, just going to make sure that I've got the right thing. So, I'll ask a question, and then you tell me if I've missed one, because I might have just not cut and pasted. So do you support proportional representation and why? And then the second part, so that came from one person. Losing some people tonight. Good evening, bye-bye. Thank you for coming.
They want to watch the Scotland match.
Oh, maybe, yeah. Sorry, football. So, do you support proportional representation and why? And then another question, because of our current voting system, in the 2019 general election, the Green Party, Liberal Democrats and Brexit Party received 16% of votes between them, but only 2% of seats. Many voters feel they do not have a voice. Does your party support proportional representation? If not, do you think they should? Okay, so I was starting with Beverly.
Reform UK support proportional representation, yes.
Thank you. Okay, James?
The challenge you always have is the issue of how you have a constituency link, because essentially if you have raw PR in its purest form, you have a party list, so candidates would go on the list and then you are allocated by your party according to the percentage rather than linked to a location. If you have a link to a location, there has to be some way of deciding who comes first in a location. Our system prioritises having representation of people who are, all of them, the most popular person in a particular area, rather than basing it on the wider national vote. Now, you may think that's flawed or not. I would say the great benefit is it gives, normally, greater stability. There's no purpose. And a final point, we did have a referendum on changing the electoral system, and actually the public in this country voted to keep the current one, and that's what I would do.
Okay, thank you, Jessie.
Yes, I do support it. I think it makes it a lot fairer and a lot more democratic. It gives smaller parties a chance, and independents, it gives them a chance to not only run, but to get in, and it gives you someone to vote for. So if you've been on social media or read the newspaper in the past couple of weeks, you will have been bombarded with how to vote tactically. And that might be good, but you might not actually be voting for the person that you want in. And then that would give you the opportunity to do that. It would give you your voice, and it would mean that your vote isn't wasted, which in then would bring more people out to vote. The turnout seems to be getting lower, and it's because people don't feel like they have anybody to vote for. So yes, and also my party supports it for all of the reasons I just said and more.
Thank you. Emma?
Thank you. I do, in fact, support electoral reform. Quite exactly in what form is something that has to be further explored. And I've been a member of the Labour campaign for electoral reform for some while now, and that's something I will be pushing from within the Labour movement, and in common with many of my fellow Labour members. The reasons for it are because actually it's fairer, everyone's vote counts, but also it's about trying to restore some of the trust in our politics, in our politicians, and in our political system. And it would certainly appear that our current and very outdated system is one of the things that feeds that distrust and that sense of alienation from our politics. So, and hence, for example, as you say, Jessie, the actual turnout going down at successive elections. But I would remind you, of course, that we are currently fighting this election under first past the post.
Thank you, Tom.
Absolutely, 100%. I mean, I think I've told anyone who wanted to hear that I actually wrote for my finals in my economics degree that I thought first past the post was much better than proportional representation. I completely have changed my mind on that. And I think what I knew then was that we had good quality politicians who put the country first and their constituents thereafter, with some of the guardrails of Europe as well. And I think that we didn't really need to change the way we voted. But I think now we do. We have a different type of politician, and we have a different type, I think, of society that feels unrepresented. And I think that is true. And I think that with that, we genuinely need to reform, and as Emma says, to regain trust. I also thought that we'd end up like Italy if we did that. But actually, look, Giorgia Meloni's gone in Italy as a right-wing extremist and has, through proportional representation, had to manage a very different approach and taken some of the rough edges off it. And so it's definitely not perfect proportional representation, but I think it's better than we currently have. And I think that James makes a good point about representation, but the challenge that representation when you have a party system with whips is that actually the conflicts of interest I don't think are very well managed, put it that way, around who do you vote on behalf of? Do you have to vote on behalf of your party, or do you have to vote on behalf of your constituents that you represent? And I think it's a very, very difficult challenge for anyone to face. And therefore, as I say, the local representative thing I think has perhaps some less impact than it might otherwise do. So that's what I'd like to say. I think we absolutely need voting reform, and I think, having lived in a constituency where here in South Suffolk, since 1982 it was formed, if you didn't vote for either Tim Yeo or James, your vote counted for nothing. You might as well not bother to turn up, and that doesn't feel fair to me.
Thank you. So, we'll do it. I thought it was best to ask this question after asking them. I would say a show of hands, please, for who supports proportional representation in the audience.
Wow.
So that's quite a huge number of people that obviously feel that their vote doesn't count, and that's quite interesting, and hopefully it's interesting for you to all see. So. Very, very quick question. Should MPs only be allowed 2 terms as an MP? Tom?
Look, I mean, having been a CEO, they say, 10 years is as much as you should have as a CEO because you get out of date. I actually don't think that's right for MPs. I think we need experience. I think we need people who have been through various economic cycles, political cycles. It's really important to retain that kind of blueprint of knowledge. What we do want to be able to do is vote them out, though, if they're not any good. And my biggest challenge to everybody is that actually the job of trying to get elected is not a very good kind of workout for actually the job of a legislator. I mean, how many leaflets you can deliver, how many banners you can put up, doesn't make you a good legislator. So it's really difficult. I think we need much more information about what your MP does for you. Hold them to account. Can you really understand that? Are they really part of the community? Are they doing what they say they would do? Or are they just going through the motions, getting elected, and then doing what they need for their own personal position?
It's a nice question, and like Tom, I do think, however, that some experience is probably quite useful once you've actually got into Parliament and understood how the system works and how best to serve your constituents and your area to the government in Westminster. So I'm not there yet, so I can't give you an answer to whether I think it should be 2 or 3. But I think going beyond that is probably a bit much and feeds the kind of complacency that we see, or the sense of alienation again from people who sat in seats for a very long time, and where it's harder to see what benefit is being done. But also just sometimes change is useful. And it refreshes things. And what we need in Parliament actually is a whole load of people from a whole load of different walks of life with different experiences, especially from our public sector services.
Thank you.
Jessie?
So I think that if your MP isn't up to standard, then you have the opportunity to vote them out and vote for someone different who you think will be better or who you know will be better. Whereas if your MP is doing a fantastic job and you love what they're doing and they're making your community better, why on earth would you want to get rid of them? So I don't think that putting time limits on an MP's term is particularly helpful.
Okay. Jess?
I'd say exactly the same as Jessie. If the electorate don't think an MP should do more than 2 terms, they'll vote the MP out. I suppose the question comes from the fact that the US president, for example, has 2 terms, but there's a very specific reason for that to do with the history of the United States and a relationship with a certain other country that we're currently sitting in. But I think they're very different questions, and as I say, we may soon find out whether there are some MPs who people think shouldn't be doing more than the terms they've currently sat.
Okay, thank you. And Beverly?
If they're a good MP, I think maybe they should stay longer than 2 terms. But this is something that may be controversial. Why do we need as many? Perhaps we could halve the amount of MPs.
Thank you. So we sort of would like to have tried to get finished by 9 o'clock. That's 3 minutes away. Okay, and we've still got, there are still 2 questions, but I want really tight answers on them, if that's okay, because I think everybody probably is getting a bit sleepy. Definitely. Okay, so what experience does each candidate offer in making decisions on matters like national defence? As succinctly as possible, please. Start with Beverly and come back this way. Thanks.
Well, clearly I don't have any experience on defence decisions. James has got all the experience. But we do have a military advisor at Reform UK. We want to increase spending so that it comes up to 2.5% of GDP. Then after 6 years, we want to increase it to 3%. We want a pay review. A soldier is paid less than an Amazon worker, which is unacceptable. We want to introduce a new armed forces bill, including a watchdog to fast-track complaints and appeals in housing and welfare. And we want to recruit 30,000 for the army, full-time, not national service. We want to introduce incentive and tax breaks to boost the UK defence industry and reform the procurement side of it, and listen to frontline personnel to ensure they get the equipment they need. And we also want free education during and after service, and ensure that those servicemen and women return to a successful civil life.
Thank you. James?
Well, it's been an amazing experience. I've been the Defence Procurement Minister since last April. Responsibility of obviously purchasing equipment for the military, defence exports, and what we call the nuclear enterprise, which is an interesting thing to be responsible for, it's fair to say. And finally, the thing I'm proudest of, I have personally introduced a new procurement model called the integrated procurement model. The key thing about it is, Bev says, giving the equipment that the military need. I think one thing you have to have is a system where you have a balance of expert opinion within the Ministry of Defence about the best equipment, because, shall we say, there can be a bit of being wed to certain presumptions of the capability and platform we need to buy, whereas I think the new world is coming of automation and uncrewed systems and artificial intelligence. So my model is to have far greater input for scientists, and in defence we have these amazing scientists at a place called DSTL, which is that famous place that's in a Sherlock Holmes story, on the new Sherlock programme, you know the one. That's how we will ensure that whether it's lasers or drones, we will maintain our competitive advantage in the military sphere.
Thank you. Jessie?
Thank you. So when it comes to decision making, I have 6 children, 3 dogs and a husband. So if I don't make rational decisions every day, people die. As a councillor, I have to make decisions for you to better your well-being. I also have the opportunity to sit on committees like the Education and Transport Committee, Permanence Panel, where you're actually looking at fostering and adoption, and the Planning Committee, which you all have a love-hate relationship with. Now, when it comes to the military, I obviously have no personal experience, but what I can say is that every MP has to start from somewhere, and experience is learned. But I will say that I do come from a really strong military background. My grandparents, my aunts, my uncle, even my partner have all served in the military. And so I understand the importance of experience in making decisions within that criteria, and on matters like national defence. And while military gives first-hand knowledge of operations, making defence decisions requires broader perspectives as well.
Thank you.
I also don't have James's experience in defence procurement, you will be surprised to hear. But I do have experience in actually listening to people around me and taking advice, seeking expert opinions. Michael Gove might have devalued the role of experts, but actually MPs and governments need experts to explain what happens. The business of government is not simple. The business of any department in government is not simple, let alone when you try and actually pull all these strands together and actually make sense of the things that need to be in place to improve people's lives. So what I would say to you is that I can listen, I can analyse, I can look at evidence, I can ask people, I can ask you, I can ask other people who know things, and on that basis I can make decisions on your behalf as a local constituency MP. But I would also point out that, of course, it's not necessarily the job of an MP to be in government. And it's government ministers who would make decisions, for example, about national defence procurement. So, you know, we're not all there to be experts in everything. We're there to be able to take soundings, to hear evidence, to make judgments that will, I hope, improve all of your lives for the better.
Thank you. And Tom.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, as a former CEO of a business with 100 people, I have got very used to making decisions. But I think what's really interesting is much more about this as an MP is you've got to really think about who all the stakeholders are, and you have to really keep them in balance. You've got all of your constituents, you've got the best interests of the country to put it, and those are really, really challenging decisions. And I think Emma's right, and James obviously has experienced it. The business of government is difficult, and you do need to be able to listen, and you do need to be able to take on complex and nuanced positions and make decisions and not be frightened of them. And I think it's really important that our politicians feel that they should be totally accountable for those decisions. And I'm very comfortable with that if you decide to elect me as your MP.
Thank you. So, I take the decision that's that, because we're
9 o'clock.
Yeah, we're over 9 o'clock, and I think actually we got through pretty much all of the questions. So, and also I'm sure that your candidates will actually, if any of your questions didn't get answered or answered the way you thought, or didn't get asked, then I'm sure that they are available to be contacted probably by email if you want more information. So just very quickly, this was not supposed to be a Dimbleby style thing, or I just felt it was important to listen to what people wanted to know and just get the answers straight from the horse's mouth. It was probably a really good opportunity for you all to do a bit of canvassing. But this was really about you rather than these in a way, really. But so all I want to say is thank you for coming. Thank you very much to the candidates for giving your time to come and speak to everybody.
And thank you, Annie, for organising it. Yeah,
That's
really
all right.
appreciate
That's
it.
okay. Thank you. So I think it's what this building's really good for, is these communities. Thank you to James on sound, Adam who's filming. So we didn't live stream it today because there were a few issues just around validating accounts and things like that. But we will put the recording up online and we'll send that link out to people that couldn't be here tonight. Thank you to James as timekeeper, thank you, which most of you managed to do brilliantly. And thank you to all of the volunteers here, because we couldn't do this without them. They're all stewarding or doing all the other jobs. They deserve that. They work really hard. We really couldn't do it. And so many places can't do it without the volunteers. And so if anybody's interested in volunteering, just come and see me, okay? And I'll chew your arm off. And finally, if you could put your exit polls in, just in the box, it would be really interesting to know if, after listening to what they've been saying tonight, who you might put your tick against, okay? Thank you so much, thank you.